So on this stacked Queensberry versus Matchroom 5-on-5 card in Saudi Arabia, I feel like this one might be the hardcore boxing heads' favorite matchup. We've got Raymond Ford, 15 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw, defending his newly earned WBA Featherweight title against Nick Ball, 19 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw. As I mentioned, this is a part of that Queensberry versus Matchroom 5-on-5, which was supposed to be headlined with Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol for the undisputed light heavyweight title. Beterbiev pulled out due to injury. Bivol's still going to be fighting on a card, but it's going to be more of a tune-up. But thankfully, they're keeping the rest of this card. So the 5-on-5 is going to proceed, and it's now headlined with Zhilei Zhang versus Deontay Wilder, or Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang. I've been seeing more Zhang versus Wilder, it being billed that way. But on this fantastic card that also features Filip Ergovic versus Daniel Dubois and the up-and-coming Hamza Shiraz versus Ammo Williams, I'm really looking forward to that one. I feel like Raymond Ford versus Nick Ball has kind of captured the imagination because of how both of these guys have been performing in their most recent fights. Raymond Ford just earned the vacant WBA featherweight title. That was the belt that Lee Wood relinquished, and it sounds like we're going to get a date on the rematch between Wood and Warrington sometime soon. I don't know if it's going to be up at 1:30, but we'll see. Raymond Ford fought Otabek Kolmatov in one of the fights of the year so far for 2024. This fight was unbelievable. As it stood, people kind of viewed this as a 50-50 fight, although Kolmatov was almost a 2-to-1 favorite over Raymond Ford. And I think that was because Raymond Ford a few fights ago had underperformed against Edward Vasquez. Ford was given the split decision win in a fight that most people thought Edward Vasquez deserved to win. Ford really never made the necessary adjustments to really seize control of the fight. It always seemed like he was on his back foot, having trouble with the pressure. And Edward Vasquez, to his credit, has since won a few fights, and his only loss since this fight against Ford was a very close, razor close fight against then 130-pound champion Joe Cordina, who since lost to Anthony Casace. But Cordina versus Vasquez was very close. Raymond Ford versus Vasquez was very close, and that one at the time felt like a robbery. So I feel like Raymond Ford, with failing to impress there, and although he won his next couple of fights against Zakaria Lucas and then more recently against Jesse Magdaleno, a former belt holder who some of you might remember at one point had given Nonito Donaire one of his worst beatings. Like at that time, I thought Donaire was on his way to retirement. It's just amazing that he went on to fight for like nearly another decade. But by the time Raymond Ford fought Magdaleno, Magdaleno was very, very post-prime. In fact, even since Raymond Ford beating up on Magdaleno, winning a unanimous decision, Magdaleno has since been stopped by Brandon Figueroa, who I really want to see fight some of the other top 126 guys. I know at 122 he fought Stephen Fulton. He stopped Luis Neri, and he's beaten Mark Magsayo at 126. But I really want to see him and how his style would go against like the Luis Alberto Lopez, against, you know, the winner of Raymond Ford versus Nick Ball, that type of a fight. Hell, I'm curious to see how Naya the Monster Inoue would do against Brandon Figueroa's type of pressure. But Raymond Ford, because of that underperformance, at the time it was seen as an underperformance against Edward Vasquez, and fighting to a draw a couple fights prior against Aaron Perez, I think that a lot of people kind of looked at Raymond Ford and were not sure if he was more sizzle than substance. Well, this fight against Otabek Kolmatov answered all of those questions. Kolmatov was doing pretty well early. He won a few of those early rounds. This was a fight where he was bringing the pain to Raymond Ford, and then in the 4th round, after getting hurt in the 3rd round, Raymond Ford made an adjustment, started coming forward on Kolmatov, and then it became an explosive fireworks fight where it was Raymond Ford coming forward, throwing combinations, Kolmatov being the higher volume guy, putting more punches together, but you could see that the power behind his punches was kind of weakening into the middle and late rounds. This was a barn burner. Plus, Raymond Ford received a bad cut over his eye, which, you know, given that this fight against Kolmatov, which resulted in a dramatic 12th round stoppage win for Raymond Ford, earning the WBA featherweight title. Again, this is one of the fights of the year. this fight, grueling, brutal fight for both guys, where there was a lot of ebb and flow, a lot of swing rounds, difficult fight to score. And if it wasn't for Raymond Ford putting the foot on the gas in the 12th round and having Kolmatov that badly hurt to where the referee stopped the fight, some thought that it was an early stoppage. I personally did not. But if this one went to the scorecard, it's anybody's guess how this fight was going to be scored. But this fight took place in March of this year. We're talking about this fight happening on June 1st between Raymond Ford and Nick Ball. I'm just wondering, is this giving Raymond Ford, who is a young fighter and you can recover a lot quicker when you're young, but given the cut, given the 12-round grueling nature of this fight against Kolmatov, who's a very hard puncher, and we don't know how good Kolmatov really is. We've seen him against lesser competition, but again, he was the favorite over Raymond Ford. But I don't know how Kolmatov versus Nick Ball would play out. I don't know if Kolmatov is should be a top 8 guy in the division, or if he's more top 12 through 16, ability wise, not where he's actually ranked, because he's obviously out of the top 10, but in terms of how good he is, I don't know where Kolmatov really stands. We have to see these guys fight each other. But I do know that Kolmatov gave Raymond Ford a run for his money. And again, I'll say it a third time, one of the fights of the year for 2024. And another thing about this fight having taken place in March, in the beginning of March, and then 3 months later, Raymond Ford fighting Nick Ball, Ford said that he started to come forward on Kolmatov because the style of fight that he wanted to fight, kind of the back foot reactive, reflex-based, counter-punching style, he said that this wasn't going to work against Kolmatov because he had a difficult weight cut, and at the time he said he was going to go up to 130. Well, this fight against Nick Ball is a title defense at 126. So did Raymond Ford just keep the weight off after the fight with Kolmatov, get right back into the gym and start training for Nick Ball, where you're already dropping weight, keeping weight off? Are you doing too much within a short interval of time to where the weight cut or the quick turnaround is going to impact your performance against a very voluminous, pressure intensive Nick Ball? That's a big question that I have here, because if you're not at your absolute best and you don't have your full durability, your capacity, your endurance, had a difficult weight cut, Nick Ball isn't the guy to fight with. And the reason why this fight is also just surging in excitement and in anticipation is because of how Nick Ball has been looking. So here we've got Camden, New Jersey, Raymond Ford. We've got Liverpool, England, with Nick Ball. By the way, Liverpool, home of the Fab Four, the Beatles. But right now, Raymond Ford is a minus 150. So he's like a 1.5 to 1 favorite over Nick Ball. Nick Ball is a plus 150, 1.5 to 1 underdog. So the odds makers see this one as being very, very close. And yes, Raymond Ford is a bell holder, but in terms of experience, he's not necessarily much more experienced than Nick Ball. If you look at the top 2 or 3 guys that Raymond Ford has fought, it's Kolmatov, Jesse Magdaleno, and probably Edward Vasquez, maybe Felix Caraballo, who's also been in there with Shakur Stevenson and took a beating against Shakur Stevenson, another New Jersey native. Whereas Nick Ball, after fighting the likes of Isaac Lowe, good fighter, not a great fighter, but Isaac Lowe got TKO'd in the 6th round against Nick Ball. And then he started to step it up in his last couple of fights against Isaac Dogboe, who, when they had Nick Ball as a sizable favorite over Isaac Dogboe, who's, been a bell holder at 122. I mean, he got beat down pretty badly twice by Navarrete back in the day, but he beat Joet Gonzalez. He beat Adam Lopez, Blue Nose, both in very grueling fights. In fact, most of Isaac Dogboe's fights in recent years have been absolutely brutal and grueling. I'm watching these fights feeling oh man, I'm just hoping that this doesn't have long-term effects. Put it like this: Isaac Dogboe is somehow still in his 20s with all of those tough fights that he's already had to date. But yeah, Isaac Dogboe's also been in there with Robeisy Ramirez. That was for a vacant title bout. I think it was a WBO featherweight title bout. And that was a very close and competitive fight. Robeisy Ramirez dropped Dogboe, I think, in the last round, and Robeisy Ramirez pulled it off and won that title. But Isaac Dogboe has been a veteran, a very young veteran, but a veteran. When Isaac Dogboe fought Nick Ball that was the first time that I thought that I saw Isaac Dogboe starting to drop off in terms of his performance ability. Yes, he did have some exciting moments, like at the end of a couple rounds, he blasted Nick Ball, almost dropped him. One of those punches should have probably been a knockdown. When Nick Ball came forward, Isaac Dogboe was in the corner. He hit him with a counter, kind of grazed him, but Nick Ball fell forward and into the ropes. I thought that that should have been a knockdown. And there was a push in like the following round where Nick Ball hit and pushed Dogboe, leaned on him. Dogboe went down, and the referee called that one a knockdown, but not the one where Dogboe had arguably knocked Ball down, you know, the round prior. But Isaac Dogboe closed a couple of those rounds strongly, and he did look for moments to go to Nick Ball's body. Dogboe fought this fight with a very high guard, but he wasn't coming anywhere close to matching Nick Ball's volume. So Dogboe, at the end of the day, looked like he was pretty overwhelmed by what Nick Ball was bringing to the table. So Nick Ball, aside from Navarrete in those two fights, I think that Isaac Dogboe took a more one-sided beating against Nick Ball than he did against any of those guys, Robeisy Ramirez or any of his other opponents. I thought that Nick Ball was the second most impressive looking fighter against Dogboe. So that was a big step up for Ball. Passed the test with flying colors. It was a unanimous decision win. And then he fights Ray Vargas for Vargas's WBC featherweight title. And this was on the AJ versus Ngannou undercard. Ray Vargas won the early rounds. Ray Vargas, it's almost irrelevant to bring up Ray Vargas in this context in terms of what it might mean in a fight against Raymond Ford, because build-wise, Ray Vargas is such an outlier. He's like nearly 6 feet tall at 126. Like, he was 122 before that at that same height. He's really like an anomaly in that regard. But Ray Vargas from distance was able to outbox Nick Ball. And then it became like a tale of two fights where Nick Ball won almost all of the rounds in the second half of the fight. And just body wise, Nick Ball is such a short and stocky brute. He was just kind of throwing Ray Vargas around. Like, Ray Vargas fell to the canvas like 3 or 4 times where they didn't rule it a knockdown. I think there might have been one knockdown in that fight, but there were several times that Ray Vargas hit the canvas, but it was just because his body was too weak, it seemed, to support the wrestling that Nick Ball was engaging in. So Ray Vargas looked like he was kind of being tossed around, especially in the second half of the fight, and Nick Ball really took the fight to Ray Vargas. Most thought that Nick Ball deserved the win, but this ended up being a split draw. And I thought that Nick Ball was going to win the fight. I didn't quite look at it as being a robbery with it being a split draw, because I feel like when a fighter starts to really emerge in the second half of the fight, starts to really rally, wins a few rounds in a row in the second half of the fight, then it's almost like we have a recency bias, and we see the guy who was coming on strong in the second half, almost like we forgot what happened in the first half of the fight. So I do think that a draw was reasonable, but as I was watching the fight, I thought that Nick Ball probably edged it. But yeah, Ray Vargas retained his title, and now in the second fight in a row, Nick Ball will be challenging for one of these featherweight belts. So as I'm gauging Ford versus Ball, first of all, Raymond Ford, I think it's Eddie Hearn's first fighter who Eddie Hearn has promoted from the first fight in his professional career to become champion. So Raymond Ford is Eddie Hearn's first, we could say, homegrown, even though Eddie Hearn, you know, Matchroom is famously a British outlet who does have a lot of American fighters, especially in recent years. But Raymond Ford is the first Eddie Hearn promoted from beginning to the championship fighter. So I think that that's pretty dope, that it's an American fighter with a British promoter, and that this partnership has worked in the way that it has. And you could see Eddie Hearn's reaction when Raymond Ford beat Kolmatov in that dramatic 12th round to become champion. Eddie Hearn was almost as overcome with emotion as Raymond Ford was. It was really kind of a beautiful scene. But yeah, with Ford versus Ball, I'm wondering which one of these styles of fight is more likely to play out. There are a couple that come to mind. I see perhaps being that Raymond Ford is a lefty who might be looking to counterpunch, even though Raymond Ford said that he's going to take the fight to Nick Ball. He said that in one of those face-off conversations. Raymond Ford, it sounds like he has plans of making this his consecutive come forward, come at you fight. And maybe it's because he's going to have another difficult weight cut. But again, if he's going to be having difficulty body-wise, this is going to be a tough task against Nick Ball, who, again, high volume, lots of pressure, tons of punches, just hard punches, combinations, and he's got good timing. It's not like he's a slow fighter either. He's got pretty quick punches. He uses his pummeling jab. He uses his feet a lot to get in and out of range. So he's moving. This isn't just like a clumsy brute who's just a powerhouse. No, he uses his feet pretty well and he stays low. He gets in a crouch. Very explosive. But Raymond Ford, being that he's a southpaw against orthodox, and I just hope that this fight isn't influenced or impacted by clashes of heads. Very possible. Raymond Ford's about 5'6", Nick Ball's about 5'2", so there's a 4-inch difference, but I'm just looking at the way that these guys might be coming at each other and just seeing the increased likelihood of a head clash. I mean, Raymond Ford versus Kolmatov featured a pretty impactful head clash as well. But Raymond Ford, the southpaw, Nick Ball, the orthodox come forward, sustained pressure guy. I'm wondering if this fight doesn't take the complexion of Gervonta Tank Davis versus Isaac Cruz, Pitbull, where the also short Gervonta Davis was fighting the even shorter Pitbull, because Raymond Ford is going to be much taller than Nick Ball, who's used to being the shorter fighter like Pitbull is used to being the shorter fighter. But I'm wondering if it's going to be like Raymond Ford trying to time and pick off Nick Ball on his back foot. Gervonta Davis famously had issues with Pitbull Cruz, and yes, he did badly injure his left hand where it almost seemed like it was taken out of the fight throughout the second half of the fight. Gervonta Davis barely threw that left hand in the second half. But I think that if Raymond Ford, if he's having some weight cut difficulties like he said he did against Kolmatov, I think that Raymond Ford might have difficulty finding Nick Ball coming in if he's looking to time him in that way. And Raymond Ford, in that face-off, face-to-face conversation with Nick Ball, said, yo, I'm looking to fight him not on my back foot, but I'm looking to bully the bully. So it sounds like Raymond Ford might have plans of coming at Nick Ball. Now, is he just saying that and it's just gamesmanship, or does he really plan to try to back Nick Ball up? I almost think that it would be wise to back up Nick Ball, because I could see Raymond Ford, if he's looking to fight that back foot style fight, I don't know how good he really is at that. And you could hear, even in this fight against Kolmatov, you could hear Raymond Ford's corner talking to him saying, yo, you're going to have to bring the fight to the guy. Don't, basically encouraging Raymond Ford to abandon the back foot style and to start walking Kolmatov down. Again, Raymond Ford didn't have success with that back foot style against Edward Vasquez. Like, if you're going to fight that back foot style, you got to be so damn good at it. And sometimes being good at it isn't good enough. Like sometimes you've got to be great at it. Like when Floyd Mayweather fought Ricky Hatton, that's the other similarity that I think might be the case here. So Gervonta Davis versus Pitbull Cruz 1, Floyd Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton being another. And I know that a lot of people like to crap on Ricky Hatton because in his two most high profile fights, he got knocked out against Floyd Mayweather and against Manny Pacquiao. I'm like, no, look at Ricky Hatton's career. This guy was a beast. Like, not only when he was beating Costa Tszyu, but in the other fights when he stopped Paulie Malignaggi, and he just beat the brakes off of a lot of guys before fighting Floyd and Manny Pacquiao. But if Floyd Mayweather wasn't great at fighting his styles of fights, should I say, he could have lost that fight to Ricky Hatton because Ricky Hatton was bringing the pain. Like, if Raymond Ford is like a B plus level, back foot, reflex based, quick twitch, counter punching style fighter, if he's a B plus at that style, he might lose this fight against Nick Ball if that's the style that he wants to fight. But what happened with Floyd versus Ricky Hatton is Floyd fought a successful back foot style fight. After those first couple of rounds where Ricky Hatton was kind of roughing Floyd up, he started to get into a rhythm, started to properly time Ricky Hatton, and then he started to stand his ground. Because if you're looking to move too much, there comes a point in the fight where the mover has to stand his ground, because you're not going to be as elusive in the second half of the fight. Your legs get tired. You start becoming lower volume. You start becoming easier to hit. Your head isn't moving as much. So you've got to, at a point, stand your ground, be able to draw a line, and then if you're really good, then start backing the bully up. Is Raymond Ford, if he starts fighting a back foot style fight early, is he going to have enough success to where he could then flip the switch, go from being on your back foot to drawing the line, standing your ground, and then backing Nick Ball up? I think that Raymond Ford will, at a point, whether that point is early in the fight or a few rounds in or later in the fight. Again, against Kolmatov, it happened around the 4th round, late in the 4th round and then into the 5th round. I think that Raymond Ford will start to come forward because, again, I don't think that he's good enough at that now you see me, now you don't. Bow, hit you with a counter shot, hit you with something that you didn't see as you were over pursuing. I think he might be good at that, not quite good enough, especially, again, if he's having difficulty with the weight cut. So I think that Raymond Ford will start bringing the fight to Nick Ball. And Raymond Ford, I don't know how good he is at managing distance and range. Like, I don't know how much he can make this reach work for him. I think there are going to be a lot of explosive exchanges, but maybe because Raymond Ford is going to have a few inch reach advantage, not only height, but reach advantage over Nick Ball, that a lot of those exchanges that Nick Ball usually has success in, I think he's going to have success in those exchanges early against Raymond Ford, but I think halfway in where Nick Ball's legs get a little tired and he's not moving as much, I think that that few inch reach difference will start making a difference as Nick Ball continues to pursue. I think Raymond Ford will start blasting him and catching him as Nick Ball comes in a little bit short, you know, with his reach and exposes himself, because as you continue to lunge, as you become more tired, you're easier to hit. And I think Raymond Ford will take advantage of that. I was on the fence here because I do see this as being a very competitive fight between two young, very explosive, undefeated fighters with a lot of confidence, a lot of surging confidence. But I think that Raymond Ford will not only win this fight, I think he's going to stop Nick Ball late. I think that as Raymond Ford starts pouring it on and Nick Ball continues to pursue, that there will be more and more opportunities for Ford to hurt Ball. I think he's going to hurt Ball like in the 7th or 8th. I think he's going to start taking control of the fight around that time, even though, again, Nick Ball fights hard and strong in the second half of fights. It's not like Nick Ball has been waning and weakening. Again, it was Ray Vargas who looked like he was waning and weakening against Nick Ball. Isaac Dogboe, again, Nick Ball put a beating on Isaac Dogboe in the middle of the fight, late in the fight, throughout the fight. Nick Ball is a very ferocious and persistent pressure puncher. But I think that with Raymond Ford's style that he's going to employ in this fight, I think it's going to backfire a bit on Nick Ball. I think Raymond Ford will stand his ground, will walk Nick Ball down to a degree. And as Nick Ball continues to try to keep his foot on the gas, I think he's going to run into something big. I think that he's eventually going to get backed up, dropped, and eventually stopped. I think this is going to be a pretty exciting fight, and I've got Raymond Ford winning a late stoppage over Nick Ball and retaining his newly earned WBA featherweight title. Let me know what you think about Raymond Ford versus Nick Ball. Again, I feel like this is kind of like the people's fight. Let me know if you're as excited about this one as I am. Who do you have winning this one and how? And also, if Raymond Ford beats Ball, do you think this is Raymond Ford's win or lose last fight at 126? I kind of feel like it is, whether he wins or loses. I think that he was already planning on going up to 130, but I think that the money was calling when the Saudis called, and you can't really pass that up. We're seeing a lot of fighters coming back on quick timetables to answer the call. So I think that this is a case of that, where Raymond Ford's like, damn, 3 months later, after this tough fight with Kolmatov at 126 again, I think that it's going to be one of those things. And tune into the weigh-in, because I think that I wouldn't be surprised if somebody misses weight here, but we'll see. Like, it would be unfortunate, but I think that it's possible that Raymond Ford misses weight and that it's only Nick Ball who's able to fight and compete for the WBA featherweight title. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Ford versus Ball in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.